Namaste and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Bhagavad Gita class. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshinim Vasudeva Sutan Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om, O Mother Bhagavad Gita, we meditate on you who were made known to Partha by the Lord Narayana himself, you who were included in the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa, you the goddess who rains down the nectar of Advaita, non-dualism, in 18 chapters, you the destroyer of relative existence. We worship Krishna, world teacher, the son of Vasudeva, the supreme delight of his mother Devaki, and the slayer of the demons Kamsa and Chanur. We adore that supremely blissful Madhava, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent and the lame are enabled to cross over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So tonight in our Bhagavad Gita class, we will pick up where we left off last time. We are in the 15th chapter, nearing the end of it. The chapter on known as Purushottama Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Person. Again, as you know by now, each chapter in the Gita is named after a particular yoga. And this yoga is the yoga of the Supreme Person. That means God. It also means the Supreme Self. Not that the Atman is the same as Ishvara, the Atman, the name of the Supreme Self within each one of us, which is one with infinite reality, one with Brahman, according to Advaita, to non-dualism. But Ishvara is the personal God. But Ishvara also is one with Brahman. And so in Brahman, we are one. Here, Sri Krishna speaking of himself as the Supreme Person, as we will see, he's speaking of himself as God. But much of what he says also applies to the Supreme Self. It's just as it's said in the Vedanta tradition, a person who has realized their identity with the highest truth, their identity with Brahman, their identity with infinite spirit, they become like God in everything except for creation, sustenance, and destruction of the universe. That is, we don't have the power of God to create, to sustain the universe, and then to withdraw it. But in the other ways, we attain to the nature of God. And so again, because of that, there is a distinction between the soul and the personal God, but not between the soul and Brahman, nor is there a distinction between God and Brahman, except in terms of manifestation. The explanation is sometimes, or the analogy is sometimes given, that a clay mouse and a clay elephant as forms can never be the same. A clay mouse isn't a clay elephant. But as clay, both are the same. And so, as manifestations, an individual like you or me is different from Ishvara, the Lord of the universe, out of whom this creation has come, who sustains the creation, who directs everything within the creation, and into whom it returns. But as Brahman, which is the clay of existence, existence itself, as clay, we are one. So, this is the chapter on the yoga of the Supreme Person. And as I've said in previous classes on this chapter, this is, I believe, the third or fourth class on this chapter. And this will be the last class on this chapter because we only have 6 verses to take tonight to the end. So, well, let me just start. So I'll read verse 13, which we ended on last time, just to get momentum into the class, and say that again, at the beginning of the chapter, Sri Krishna uses the analogy of the Ashwatha tree, that this universe, this samsara, is like a tree with its root above and branches below, the root above being Brahman. It's rooted in reality itself. And the branches are the manifestation. And so in this chapter, Sri Krishna talks about how he has entered into creation and how he has entered into each being, that a part of him is the consciousness within each living being. And so here he continues this. In verse 13, he said, "And entering the earth through my power, I sustain the things on the earth. And I nourish all of the plants by becoming the moon, which is by its very nature nectar-like. So the moon is called Soma. So some interpret it, like Madhusudana here, interprets it as Soma, that is the nectar which manifests in the form of the sap in plants. But others interpret Soma as moon, because Soma also means the moon. And that's because there's considered, as I explained last time, a subtle relationship between the moon and the sap in plants. And that's why in all cultures around the world, until modern scientific farming took over, all cultures around the world, they planted according to the phases of the moon. The Farmer's Almanac here in America was based on that, telling people when to plant what. So then in verse 14, where we're to begin for tonight, it says, "Aham Vaishvanaro bhutva praninam dehamashritaha pranapana samayukta pachamyannam chaturvidham." So aham Vaishvanaro bhutva praninam deham ashritaha. So here, taking the form of Vaishvanara, aham Vaishvanaro bhutva, having become Vaishvanara, I, Sri Krishna, speaking as God, as the personal God. I, God, having taken the form of Vaishvanara, which I'll explain in a moment. And dwelling in the bodies of creatures. So Vaishvanara is one of the names of fire, and it relates to the digestive fire within all of us. So here Sri Krishna is saying that I, the Lord, having taken the form of the digestive fire and residing in all beings as the digestive fire. So all beings have, even bacteria have that. Bacteria might not have a stomach, but all living beings, animal and plant, they take in nourishment from outside and convert it into the things necessary to sustain life. So we take in food, and then the digestive fire converts it into the nutrients, the nutrients as acceptable to the body. And so I, having taken the form of Vaishvanara and residing in bodies of all creatures, pranapana samayukta, and joined with the prana and the apana, 2 of the 5 pranas, that is the vital forces which sustain life within a living being. Pachamyannam chaturvidham. Literally it means I cook the 4 types of food. But here it means I digest the 4 types of food, because the digestive fire digests. It cooks the food, that is, it digests the food. That is, it transforms the food into substances that can be assimilated by the body once they enter the bloodstream. So the running translation, taking the form of Vaishvanara, again, the digestive fire, and residing in the bodies of creatures, I, in association with prana and apana, 2 of the vital forces, the 2 principal vital forces, digest the 4 kinds of food. So again, this is an ancient idea that the digestive fire is considered to be a fire. And this even enters into the ideas of Ayurveda, where it said that digestive fire is fire within water, which is a very interesting concept, because that's what stomach acid is. It's acid dissolved in water. That's what digests the food. And so the Ayurvedic idea of the digestive fire is of pitta, the dosha of pitta, is that it is the fire in combination with water, which is the stomach acid. So taking the form of Vaishvanara, the digestive fire, and residing in the bodies of creatures in association with prana and apana. So it's considered that prana and apana are like a fan which stimulates the digestive fire. When we don't have enough prana, that is vital force, then the digestive fire goes low. And again, this is all tied into Ayurveda. That is the idea that sickness comes from the improper digestion of food. That if the digestion is kept strong and healthy, then the body is able to ward off disease. But disease enters the body when the prana becomes weak and the digestive force becomes weak, and then we're not able to fend off illness. And so that in I, having entered into the bodies of all creatures in the form of the digestive fire, in association with prana and apana, which stimulate the digestive fire, I digest the 4 kinds of food within all beings. So, what are the 4 kinds of food? It's not a new, what do they call it? In the nutritional science, the food pyramid. It's not a new food pyramid, no. And it's not different classes of food. It's the 4 types of the 4 types of food, or a traditional classification of foods according to how we eat them. And so there's food which has to be chewed, food that has to be broken up with the teeth by chewing on it. There's food which we chew on, but then take out things and just swallow the essence. Like that's not as common here in the West, but it's very common in India, where you have things like the danda, the drumsticks, that is mostly fiber, but you chew on it and get from the fiber all of the marrow from the vegetable, and then you take out the fiber. And so that's another type of food. Then that which is just swallowed, like rice, softly cooked rice in India, which is usually mixed with dal and other things, so it doesn't have to be chewed because it's already soft, it can just be swallowed. And then that which is licked or sucked, like mango juice or something like that. So not that you need to know this for your study of Vedanta, no, not at all. And you don't need to know this for studying the Gita. This is just so you know what the verse is talking about. The 4 types of food according to the 4 ways of getting food into the body. So taking the form of Vaishvanara, the digestive fire, and residing in the bodies of creatures, I, in association with prana and apana, digest the 4 kinds of food. So Sri Krishna here is saying that he enters into all beings as the digestive fire. So Sri Krishna, of course, or God, is actually everything. And already he said in the earlier verses, like verse 6, he talks about having entered into each being as the conscious principle. That is, each being is a part of his own being. That is the consciousness within us. So he also, here he's saying, I also, though the word also is not used in the verse, but he also enters into all beings as the digestive fire. Just as in the previous verse, which we finished on last time, he says that I am the moon which controls the sap, the vital juice of plants. So in this chapter again, he's enumerating the ways in which he is manifested here in the universe, in the workings of the universe. In a previous chapter, I believe that was chapter 9, he talks of the Vibhuti Yoga. No, that was chapter 10, the chapter on the Vibhutis. He talks about the glories within this universe that we can meditate on as symbolic of God, the greatest things in every class of being and quality. We can meditate on that as the divine being. But here he's talking about how he actually functions and presides over the functioning of things within living beings. So here it's not his glories that are symbolic that we can meditate on. Here it is the actual functioning of his being within all living beings. So then we come to verse 15. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matta smrityajnanamapohanam cha vedaischa sarvairahameva vedyo vedanta kridveda videva chaham. So this says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto, and I am seated within the hearts of all beings. I am seated within the hearts of all beings. Aham hridi sannivishto, sarvasya, of all. I am seated within the hearts of all beings. Matta smritir jnanam apohanangcha. From me come knowledge, comes remembrance, and comes forgetfulness also. From me comes knowledge, that is, because it is the conscious principle which allows for knowledge. There's a confusion in going from Indian thought to Western thought caused by the word knowledge. So we have to understand what the two different cultures mean by knowledge. And that is, in the West, when we talk about knowledge, we're usually talking about things that we know. Knowledge is usually thought of as that which can be put in books, that which can be stored in libraries, that which can be put in databases, that which can be written down, that which can be taped, etc. So knowledge is that which can be stored. It's the stuff that we know. But in the Indian tradition, it's recognized that that's not knowledge. There's a vast difference between knowledge and data. That is only data. That what is important in the act of knowledge is the consciousness which knows. It's the knowing which is important. It's not the thing that you know. And so in the Hindu tradition, and especially in Vedanta, when we speak of knowledge, we're speaking about that. I was very confused in the beginning of my spiritual life, the beginning of my monastic life, when I came to Vedanta and began to study Swami Vivekananda, when he would often speak about God is infinite knowledge. And so I would think that God means this infinite repository of all of the knowledges that are possible. Well, no, what I was thinking of was God is where all of this data, the infinite data is. No, that's not what is meant. Infinite knowledge means infinite knowing capacity, which means infinite consciousness, infinite awareness. That is infinite knowledge. So I am seated in the hearts of all. From me come memory, knowledge, and the loss of both. So I being the conscious principle, it's from me that memory comes. Again, memory, we tend to think of memories as the things that we remember. but a much deeper understanding of memory, and what he is speaking of here and what is meant in the Vedanta tradition in general. Memory is the act of remembering. That is not the things that you remember, but the calling to consciousness of things of the past. So knowledge is calling to the consciousness the things of present experience, that which I know now. Is that act of knowing now, and memory is calling up the things that I have known in the past. But the important part is the knowing of the things of the past. And so I am the cause of both. Without consciousness, which comes from God, which is God, and which is the self of every being, without consciousness, there's no knowing and there's no memory. So again, we confuse these terms in modern parlance, and especially in the West, but the confusion now is worldwide, as in India also. When we talk about the memory of a computer, that means it has a place to store data, and so that's the memory, and we can call up that memory on the computer. A document that we wrote and saved yesterday is saved in the long-term memory, not in short active memory of RAM, but on the hard drive. And so we can call that memory up. That's that reinforces, reifies the idea we have of memory, the lower idea of memory, that memory is stuff that's remembered. But no, memory is, again, in this context, is the act of remembering. That is a conscious act, which happens in consciousness. So I, Sri Krishna, I, God, am the source of knowledge, that is present experience, conscious experience. And I am, from me comes a memory as well, that is the act of remembering. And also the act of forgetting, because where does forgetting happen? That also happens in consciousness. So all of this comes from me. Matta smritir jnanam apohanangcha. From me comes knowledge, memory, and forgetfulness of both. Vedaischa sarvairahameva vedyo. And I am that which is to be known by all of the Vedas. That is, the Vedas have as their intent the knowledge of me, God. I, God, am that which is to be known by all of the Vedas. What do we seek to learn through the Vedas? Yes, there are all kinds of things in the Vedas. To learn about ceremonies and learn about language, and so many things are spoken of in the ancient Veda. So the roots of all modern fields of knowledge are found there in the Veda, at least in seed form. So many things to be known. But the central thing to be known in the Veda is God. Everything else is secondary. Everything in the Veda is aimed towards giving us the knowledge of God. And so I am that which is to be known by all of the Vedas. I, God, am that which is to be known by all of the Vedas. So Madhusudana points out in his commentary something very interesting here, and that is that in the first half, I am seated in the hearts of all. From me come memory, knowledge, and their loss. So he's still talking about how he functions within living beings. But in the second half, he's talking about his transcendental nature, that he is that which is to be known. So in one, he's talking about his manifestation within all living beings. And in the other, he's speaking about his transcendental, his divine being itself, that I am that which is to be known by all of the Vedas. Vedanta krid Veda vide vachaham. I am the author of the Vedanta, and also the knower of the Veda. So I'm the author of the Vedanta. Now some, like Madhusudana says, I am the author of the Vedanta, means that I, in the form of the great sage Vyasa, who composed the Brahma Sutras, etc., and collated the and arranged the Vedas and so forth, that it means that I, through my manifestation as the great sage Vyasa, am the author of the, or am the originator of the Vedanta. I don't myself like that interpretation at all. That seems like a very tortured and lower explanation. What I would take it to be that I am the originator of the Vedanta, because the central teaching of the Vedanta, that which everything in the Vedanta aims towards, is I am that. I am that divine being. I am God. And so I am the originator of that knowledge. Where did that knowledge come from? Where was that knowledge before the first human sage realized that highest reality? That was the nature of God to know that I am the infinite being. I am infinite reality. So I, God, am the originator of the Vedanta philosophy, because in me that is always present, even when there was no creation, even when there were no sages. So the first sages who came, they learned that which I already know from beyond time. So I am the originator of the Vedanta, and I surely also the knower of the Veda. Veda videva chaham. I am surely the knower of the Veda also. So there's a traditional salutation to the lineage of teachers. It's not very ancient in Indian terms, where ancient means something very, very ancient. But it goes back to sometime after the 9th century AD. The salutation to the teachers, because it ends with Shankaracharya and his disciples. So, well, no, actually, the first part is actually not from that. It may go back even before the time of Shankaracharya. So let's see if I can remember it. Om Narayanam Padma Bhuvam Vashishtam Shaktim Chat. No. Om Narayanam Padma Bhuvam. No. Om Namo Brahma Dibhyo Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Karatribhyo Vamsharshibhyo Mahadbhyo Namo Gurubhyaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Padma Bhuvam Vashishtam Shaktim Cha Tatputra Parasharang Cha. So that's it. That is it. In the beginning, it's a salutation to the lineage of teachers going back to the beginning. So Narayanam, so I salute Narayana, who is the first teacher, that is God. Sri Krishna is an incarnation in the traditional Hindu thought of Narayana, God as Narayana, Vishnu. And so God is the first teacher, because God is the one who has the infinite knowledge from all time and outside of time itself. And then he gives that knowledge to Brahma, that is Padma Bhuvam, the one who was born out of the lotus that grew out of Vishnu's own navel in the mythological story. Vishnu is asleep on the cosmic waters, meaning he's in samadhi, and out of his navel grows a lotus, and the lotus opens, and there is born Brahma, the creator, who is lower than God. And so Brahma is known as Padma Bhuvam, the one who is sprung from a lotus. And then Brahma creates his sons, and he gives that knowledge to his sons. And so I am the knower of the Vedas, because I am the one who has that knowledge known as Veda for all time. And from me, it goes to Brahma. Brahma gives it to his mind-born sons, and they give it to humanity. And so here again, we have to remember Swami Vivekananda's definition of Veda, that Veda doesn't mean the 4 books, or actually 4 collections of texts, because they're much larger than a single book, much larger even than a single large volume. And so the Veda means the principal meaning, the primary meaning of Veda is a repository of infinite knowledge. And the texts which we know as Veda are a partial representation of that knowledge. But the infinite knowledge itself can't be put within the covers of even many, many books. And so it's that infinite knowledge Veda, which is known by the mind of God, because of God being omniscient. And that is given to Brahma. Brahma gives it to his mind-born sons, and they give it to the world. So I am the originator of the Vedanta, as I already explained, and I surely am also the knower of the Veda, this infinite knowledge, because I am God. So reading the whole verse together, I am seated in the hearts of all. From me are memory, knowledge, and their loss. I alone am the object to be known through all of the Vedas. That is, that which all of the Vedas are pointing towards. I am the originator of the Vedanta, because I am the repository of that knowledge. I am that. As in surely I am also the knower of the Vedas. Then we come to verse 16. Dvavimau purusho loke ksharaschakshara eva cha kshara sarvani bhutani kutastho kshara uchyate. So dvavimau purusho loke. In this world, there are two people. Purusha means persons. There are two persons within this world. The kshara and the akshara. They're said to be the kshara and the akshara. So kshara means mutable, that which is always changing, and akshara means that which is stable, that which doesn't change. So he's saying that there are two persons here in this manifest universe, the changeful and the unchanging. Kshara sarvani bhutani. The mutable are all of these beings. Kutastho akshara uchyate. And that which is immutable is that which is immutable is said to be that which doesn't change, the person who doesn't change. So now on this, there are two main different opinions in interpretation, and both are acceptable. As always, I have my preference, but both are acceptable. Shankaracharya and Madhusudana, they say that and this everybody agrees, that the mutable means living beings as we experience ourselves. We see that we are constantly changing. The body is constantly changing, the mind is constantly changing, our feelings, our emotions, our sense of self is always changing. One day I say I'm sad, one day I say I'm happy. And so one day I'm a happy self, one day I'm a sad self. My memories are changing, my experiences are changing. So all beings here in this world, in this universe, all beings are the changeable person or persons. All of us are changing constantly. But the difference of opinion comes when you come to the immutable person. So first, let me give what Madhusudana says based on what Shankaracharya himself said. And of course, it's difficult to disagree with those two, but since some other Advaita commentators have disagreed with them, and I like their interpretation more, I feel free to disagree with them also. So Madhusudana, following Shankaracharya, says that the immutable person, again, he said in the first half of the verse that there are two persons in this universe, the mutable and the immutable. And so the immutable person refers to Maya, because Maya as a whole doesn't change. Maya manifests all of this change, but Maya as the root cause of this universe, Maya itself doesn't change. Everything within Maya changes, but Maya itself doesn't change. And so all living beings are the changeable, and the unchanging is Maya. I don't like that interpretation because Sri Krishna is saying that there are two persons. And Maya, unless you take Maya as the Divine Mother, which doesn't seem to be what Sri Krishna is saying here, that Maya is not a person. So we are persons, we recognize ourselves as persons, but we experience ourselves to be constantly changing. So what I prefer is what some like Sridhar Swami say, is that the unchangeable person is the jiva within us, that is our individualized consciousness. That doesn't change, that goes from lifetime to lifetime. That which within us is the witness of all of the experiences that we're having. And that which eventually is liberated when it realizes that I am actually the infinite self. I'm not even the limited consciousness. I am the infinite self. I only thought myself to be a limited consciousness. So, in that interpretation, again, living beings in their present experience, we see that we're all changing. We're all changing all of the time. And the Buddhist sense of self is based on that only. The Buddhists say that there is no other unchanging self, there's only the changing. And we only think that we are the same person, but we're not the same people. So, the Buddhist view is the common sense view. That is the illuminated common sense view. That is the common sense view of the thoughtful person who sees that we're constantly changing. There's nothing about me which is the same. My sense of self changes, my emotions change, my memories change, my body changes, my mind changes, my consciousness changes. That is, my conscious activities change, the mental activities change. So there's nothing stable in me. So that is the kshara, the mutable. But the immutable is the jivatman, that is the individualized consciousness, according to this other interpretation, because that is a person. That's the basis of our present personhood, that individualized consciousness. I am, but I am an individual. That essential quality of personhood, the sentient principle. So then in 17, he continues, in 17 and 18, he continues this thought. Uttamah purushastvanya paramatmetyudarhitaha yo lokatrayam avishya bibhartya vyaya ishwaraha. So Uttamah purushastvanya, the highest person, however, the highest person is different, meaning different from both of these, the changeable and the unchangeable. Paramatmetyudahrita, it is known as the Supreme Self. It is known as the Paramatma. So the Paramatma is different from both of these. It's different from the living beings who, admittedly, we all admit, are changing all of the time, but also different and higher than the reflected consciousness, the jivatman, the individualized consciousness. Higher than that is the Supreme Person, known as God, but here known as the Supreme Self. So as I said at the beginning of this class, God and self are the same except in matters of creation and destruction of the universe and guiding the destiny of the universe. But otherwise, we are God, because we're one with Brahman and God is one with Brahman. So in that sense, we're one with God. So I, Sri Krishna is saying, I, God, am the Supreme Person, which is known as the Paramatma. Atma iti udahrita. It is known as the Paramatma. Yo lokatrayam avishya bibhartya vyaya ishwaraha. Which is the avyaya ishwaraha, the unchanging Lord of all, God of all, yo lokatrayam avishya, who has entered into the three worlds. Again, in Vedic times, it was usually thought that there are usually spoken of the three worlds, bhura, bhuva, swa. Later, it was the seven higher worlds, and then still later, there were seven lower worlds, hellish realms. But the original Vedic idea was, in the Vedas itself, there was the idea came. It's mentioned in the Taittiriya Upanishad that the sages discovered a fourth world, Maharaloka. But the three lokas, the three worlds, are usually spoken of. Bhur, which is this world, which we experience right now. Bhuvaha, which is the world of our ancestors. There where good people go after death to live for a long time in the company of their ancestors in an idyllic and blissful circumstances. And then Swaraloka, the world of the lower deities, Varuna, Mitra, Aditya, etc. The lower deities live in Swaraloka. And we can be, if we're very virtuous, but not spiritually awakened, but very virtuous, we can be reborn in Swaraloka and live like a deity for a long time with even higher, more refined enjoyment and vast wisdom, like a god, like a lower god. We reside there. And so these three worlds. So he's saying here that, but different from both of these, the mutable beings and the immutable part within these living beings, is the Supreme Purusha, the Uttama Purusha, the Supreme Person, who is spoken of as the transcendental self, Paramatma, who, permeating the three worlds, Lokatrayamavishya, having permeated the three worlds, upholds them and is the immutable God. Yes, Bibharti. He upholds the worlds, and he is the immutable God. So, but different is the Supreme Purusha, who is spoken of as the transcendental self, who, permeating the three worlds, upholds them and is the immutable God. So again, you have the changeable beings, because again, we experience ourselves as changing. But a time comes when we turn towards spiritual life, and through spiritual practice, we realize that within me, the essence of my being, that which is the very core of my being, who I really am, doesn't change. But I'm an individual. And so that's where the schools of, the different schools of Vishishtadvaita, the qualified monism, they stop there as far as the inquiry into the self. They relate that. They discover themselves to be the individualized consciousness, separate from the body, separate from the mind, but individualized, and see themselves to be parts of God. God is the infinite fire of consciousness, and I'm a spark of that same fire. So my nature is the same as the nature of God, but I'm small, Anu, and God is vast, Vibhu. God is vast and I am small. But Advaita Vedanta says no, there's something beyond that. And that we have to go to the Paramatma, which is different from the changeable self and that unchanging Jivatma. Now, different also has to be understood in a special way. Different not in the sense that it's a third being, though that's the way Sri Krishna is speaking for our human understanding. But what it really means, according to the Vedanta philosophy, is that the Jivatma realizes, I'm not this limited consciousness. I am the infinite. So just as my sense of self right now is of a changing being, then I come to realize myself to be unchanging consciousness, but small, Anu. But then I realize that I am the infinite Paramatman, the supreme self, the whole of reality. And so it's not really that these three are different. It's three levels of experience. Those levels of experience are different. But the truth is, even now, that I am the supreme self, the Paramatman. So then we come to 18. Yasmaksharamati ham aksharapi chottamaha atosmi loke vede cha pratitha purushottamaha. So yasmaksharamati ham, since I am beyond the mutable, I, Sri Krishna, God, Ishvara, I, Sri Krishna, am beyond the mutable selves, the changing selves here, aksharadapi chottamaha, and am more excellent than the unchanging self. That is, again, in this interpretation, which I support, than the Jivatma. So I am transcendental to the mutable self. And I am more excellent than the immutable self, that is the Jivatma. He's not saying that I'm completely transcendent over that, because that itself is pure consciousness. It just has the sense of limitation. And so I am far more excellent than that, because in me there's no sense of limitation. And so in this sense also, I prefer this interpretation of the verses that we're doing now. So atosmi loke vedecha pratiha purushottama. Therefore I am known in the world and in the Vedas as the Supreme Person. So the running translation is, since I am transcendental to the mutable, that is the ordinary beings as we think of ourselves, and am most excellent compared to the immutable self, because I am unlimited, infinite, not this limited consciousness, a spark of consciousness. I am the whole of infinite consciousness. Hence, I am well known in the world and in the Vedas as the Supreme Person, that is, God. God is, or the Supreme Person is a term used often in Hinduism for God, for Ishvara. So, since I am transcendental to the mutable and the most excellent as compared with even the immutable, hence I am well known in the world and in the Vedas as the Supreme Person. So then we come to verse 19. Yo mameva masambudho janati purushottamam sa sarvavid bhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. So yo mam eva masambudho janati. One who knows me thus, one who, being free from delusion, knows me thus as Purushottamam, as the Supreme Person. So that person, that living being, who knows me thus, without delusion, as the Supreme Person. So sarvavid bhajati mam, that all-knowing one worships me, sarva bhavena bharata, in all manner, O Bharata, O descendant of the Bharata dynasty. So, O scion of the Bharata dynasty, he who being free from delusion knows me thus as the Supreme Person, he, the all-knowing one, adores me in every way. So, one who knows the real nature of God and who has realized God worships God in all ways. In all ways, what does that mean? Does that mean he knows all of the different types of pujas and all of the types of rituals and the different world traditions and so forth? No, it means that everything he does is worship because he's realized God to be all. And so when aware of this universe, he sees everything as filled with God. Everything is a manifestation of God. Everything is an expression of God. Everything as the divine being itself. And so he worships everything, sees everything with worshipful eyes. And when in deep meditation the world disappears, he worships God in God's own higher nature, unmanifest nature. So whether in deep samadhi or whether aware of the world, everything he does becomes an act of worship. As I often quote or paraphrase the words of Brother Lawrence, the great Carmelite monk of the 17th century in France. He said that now I have come to the point where even picking up a straw, I do it for the love of God. Even picking up a straw from the ground, I do it with the love of God, meaning that every act of his, even the most significant, seeing something on the ground that needs picking up for cleaning purposes or straightening up or whatever, even that I do filled with the love of God, because I see God everywhere and I know God to be everywhere. And so everything that I do in all ways is an act of worship of God. So, O scion of the Bharata dynasty, he who being free from delusion knows me thus as the Supreme Person, knows me thus as God, the infinite. He, the all-knowing one, adores me in every way. All-knowing, why or how? Not all-knowing in the sense that he has learned all of the sciences and can speak all of the languages of the world, and he knows nuclear physics and engineering and linguistics and literature and everything else. No. All-knowing because he has known the reality of everything. All of this is just a shadow. Everything here is just a shadow. The reality of everything here is God. We see everything as not God. We see everything as solid, as concrete. But the person who has realized that sees that God alone exists, And all of this is just a shadow manifesting in the being of God, that reality of God taking on all of these forms. But the forms are changeable. And so being all-knowing means that. That also is something that I remember as a kid trying to figure out when we learned in church when I was a little kid, or we heard that God is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent, all-knowing and all-pervading, all-knowing, and all-powerful. And so trying to understand what God being omniscient meant. God knows everything. But here, God is the personal God is all-knowing in a special sense. That is, the personal God, whether in Christianity or Islam or Hinduism, whatever, the personal God is all-knowing in the sense that God is the infinite consciousness in which everything here is and happens. And so God is aware, as Sri Ramakrishna says, even of the footfall of an ant. So God is all-knowing in that sense. But a sage who realizes God becomes all-knowing in the sense that such a one has known that by knowing which everything here becomes known. One who has known the essence of everything. That just as if you have many different things made out of clay, and all of them are different, an infinite number of things can be made out of clay. There's no end to the variety you can make out of clay, literally infinite in possibility. But one who knows clay itself knows the essence of all of them. And whenever they see a new form of clay, they recognize, oh, it's clay, just taking on a new form. Or a goldsmith who knows and works with gold, sees all types of gold ornaments, but knows that it's all gold. It's all gold. And so he knows the essence of all of the forms of gold. And when he sees a new form of gold, he says, oh, it's just gold that's been given a new shape. That's all that it is. So the sage becomes all-knowing in that sense, knowing the reality of everything, that everything here is nothing but the divine being. So, O son of the Scion Bharati, O scion of the Bharata dynasty, he who being free from delusion knows me thus as the Supreme Person. He, the all-knowing one, adores me in every way. And then we come to the last verse in the chapter. Iti guhyatamam shastram idamuktam maya nagha etad buddha buddhiman syat kritakrityascha bharata. So, iti guhyatamam shastram idamuktam maya nagha. O sinless one, anagha, O sinless one, thus has been spoken to you this highest secret, guhyatamam, the most secret of all secret things, shastram, this knowledge which is the most secret of all secret things. Secret, why? Because someone has kept it secret? No, secret because no one pays attention to it. It's there for anyone to discover, but no one wants to discover it. We're too busy with things here, doing things here, enjoying things here, etc. And so even if someone like Sri Krishna comes, or Sri Ramakrishna comes, or Jesus comes, and tells the truth to people, they don't want to hear it because they're busy with other things. And so therefore it is secret. It's secret because no one pays attention. No one is interested. Nobody looks in that direction. They're content with the surface of things because this looks so real and it seems to promise so much. That just come out and enjoy me. The world says to us, just come out and enjoy me. I'm here for your enjoyment. I'm just here to be enjoyed. Come, enjoy, have fun. And we find out too late that we are the ones being enjoyed, that we don't enjoy the world enjoys us. And so the wise one, after lifetimes of experience, finally realizes that, no, I want to seek something else. The world's promise is empty. The promise is empty. That's not what I want. And so, O sinless one, this most secret scripture has been uttered by me. Etad buddhva buddhiman syat. One, having known this, one becomes a wise person. Having known this, one becomes wise. Krita krityascha bharata, and has done that which had to be done. So that's a beautiful expression, and that's used in the Buddhist tradition. They use a different Sanskrit and Pali construction, and the Pali being based on Sanskrit. So Buddhism is often thought to have been embodied in Pali. Pali came later in Buddhism. The Buddha never spoke Pali. Pali actually was an artificial language created several centuries after Buddha to put the Buddhist text in. It was created out of the Prakrits, the languages which had descended from Sanskrit and were the popular languages, and then the scriptures were translated into Pali. But in Buddhism, even from early times, there was the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism, and then the Prakrit tradition, and the Prakrit became gradually translated into Pali. And so they also have a beautiful expression, which I don't remember in their construction in Sanskrit, but it also means that the Arhat, the realized soul, is one who has done that which was to be done. That is, done that which was the very purpose of human birth. And so here Sri Krishna says, understanding this, anyone will become wise and have his duties fulfilled, O scion of the Bharata dynasty. Well, that's Madhusudana's interpretation. I prefer my own interpretation, which is legitimate also, and which is part of the tradition, and that is krita krityascha, one who has done that which was to be done. Krita, done, kritya, that which was to be done. So one who has done that which was to be done. So he takes it as one and have his duties fulfilled. That's well, actually, I don't know if I'd have to study the original Sanskrit commentary to know if that's what Madhusudana actually meant, or whether it's the translator who put it that way. But anyway, I think a much better translation of it, and interpretation of it rather, is that understanding this that I have taught to you, O Arjuna, anyone will become wise and will have done that which is to be done, fulfilled the purpose of a human birth, the highest purpose of a human birth. O scion of the Bharata dynasty, O Bharata, as he's called. So thus we come to the end of chapter 20, and next time we will take up the 16th chapter on the divine and demoniacal or demoniacal attributes. So again, this 15th chapter, as I said in the first class on the 15th chapter several weeks ago, that among traditional monks, and in some centers of our order also, besides chanting Brahmarpanam at the time of food, and it pertains to the noon meal, which is the main meal in India, especially among traditional people and among the monasteries, they chant the whole of the 15th chapter, all 20 verses, and then they come to Brahmarpanam. So it's common among monks to have memorized the 15th chapter, especially if one lives in the traditional circumstances where that is chanted every day before food. So some of our monasteries, like at Saralapit, the college outside of Bellarmut, or it's part of Bellarmut, but it's outside the main gate of the main monastery. There the monks chanted, I believe, every day before they eat. It used to be done, I probably shouldn't say this,